What happens when you get your significant other to button mash their way through a fighting game? Well, you get some pretty entertaining footage, so sit back and enjoy. Today we're going to be taking a look at Darkstalkers Chronicle for the Sega Dreamcast. The Darkstalkers series has never been too popular on this side of the world for whatever reason. Street Fighters always remain king. But over in Japan, it's actually been quite a popular series. Vampire, as it's known over there, featured some of the most incredible character designs of the time, and while still running on the CPS2 arcade board, the game looked noticeably better and smoother than Street Fighter II. It would go on to spawn 4 official arcade sequels in Japan, and while only 3 of the 5 total games would ever make their way to North America, this particular version never made its way here. And believe it or not, at one point in time, it was the most sought-after Dreamcast import, fetching upwards of $150 on eBay and various import sites. And there's a reason for it. It's because it's extremely rare. There's only 5,000 discs that were ever pressed, and the only way to purchase the game back in 2000 was through Sega directly. So, how has it held up, and is it worth trying to hunt down today? Well, I'll give you the answer right now, so you don't have to watch the whole review. Hell yes, it's worth hunting down, and it's held up surprisingly well. One of the best compilation titles ever released is what you will find in Vampire Chronicle. And it's not your typical compilation either. You don't just select the game you want to play and away you go. Nah, some real thought actually went into this. So, basically, here's what happens. You start the game, and you get 3 options. You have to select from Vampire, Vampire Hunter, and Vampire Savior. And those are actually game modes, not the actual game. So, in essence, this is one game with just all the various game modes in it. So for those that know nothing of the series, Vampire was the original game, and it features a special meter, or gauge, that you can fill up to perform unique or enhanced special attacks. The meter constantly drains itself, which forces you to stay on the offensive. Once you finally manage to fill the meter, you only have a short amount of time before it's totally drained, which basically forces you to use your special attacks. And like I said, you can either use a unique special move or just more powerful versions of your regular special attacks. Vampire Hunter mode changes things up by allowing you to stock the special meter. This means that you decide when you want to use your special moves. It also introduced what were called enhanced special moves, which you do by performing your character's regular special moves but using, say, 2 or 3 punch and kick buttons instead of the regular 1. And this eats up some of the special meters, so you have to be mindful of the stocks you have. The other big addition was something called the extra special moves, which would require a unique button input to pull off, but were really cool to look at and fun to watch. Vampire Savior mode followed Vampire Hunter's system with a slight modification here and there, and it basically altered the way the rounds work. Instead of having a winning pose, player 1 wins sort of deal, it basically plays out like one giant round. Just you fight until one character is like killed off or whatever, and then it just says go or fight or whatever, and you begin right away. And what's interesting is the player who didn't get defeated retains the same health they had going into that quote-unquote next round. So after you've selected your playstyle, it's off to the character selection screen where you can choose one of 18 possible characters, and from there you have the option to select, your speed, if you want turbo, normal, what have you. But then you get a variety of other options, which are kind of perplexing at first. You have to select between Vampire, Hunter, Savior, and Savior 2. Long story short, each of these types limits your character's available combos and super moves to whatever they were in those respective games. So in other words, if you select Vampire, your character is only going to have access to the most basic moveset. So you get it? You add all of this together, and there's much more, which I haven't talked about, like little finer details in the way like air combos are handled and things like that. And you honestly have what I consider to be one of the very best compilation titles ever released. and it remains just as fun today as it was back in 2000. The fact that so many options are available is honestly what really sets it apart. It might sound a little complicated here, but once you actually play it for yourself, it's super easy to figure out and it works great. Like I mentioned before, all 18 characters from the entire series are available. Now, it doesn't matter if you pick, let's say, a character who was introduced in Vampire Savior and you go back and you select Vampire mode. All that's going to happen is that that particular character's moveset is just going to be trimmed a little bit. I thought that was brilliant. All the various modes allow players to experience the game as they wish. This is something else that's really important. Because if you're a new player, you might not want to start off with Vampire Savior because it's the most complex of all of them. And I like the fact that you can just go ahead and slowly work your way up. The game still looks absolutely gorgeous today. Yes, it's true, on a VGA cable it will pixelate a little bit, and sure, it's not going to be as smooth as some of the other Naomi-based Dreamcast games, but seriously, for a CPS2 game, this looks absolutely stunning, and it is arcade perfect. Every frame of animation is here. It's basically, for a retro console, this is as good as it gets. This is basically like having an arcade in your house. I know there's been an HD remake, but not of this particular entry in the series. And even then, there's stretch graphics and things like that. So if you really want to experience the one-to-one true version of the game, this is the one to get. The audio is equally impressive and features every soundtrack from the various games. So what's not to love about that? About the only negative thing I can mention, and it's not really negative per se, it's more about the fact that if you're a new player who really didn't grow up during the 90s with these fighting games, well, you might find that the gameplay modes are a little bit basic. Essentially, you have an arcade mode, a practice mode, and an online mode, which doesn't work anymore. And the practice mode doesn't really even show you anything. It doesn't show you which moves are displayed or things like that. But back then, you would read the instruction manual. That's just the way these things work. The versus mode is built into the arcade mode for a little sofa one-on-one fighting. You remember those days? Yeah, before the intertubes. But this game, like I said, did originally have access to the internet, but has since sadly been shut down. So if you don't feel like hunting down the Dreamcast version, there is a port called Darkstalkers Chronicle, the Chaos Tower for the PSP, which, believe it or not, I actually reviewed way back when. Although I should mention the load times were exceptionally bad compared to the ones on the Dreamcast, which are pretty much non-existent. Now, for the asking price of about $40 to $80, it's usually somewhere in between that, I feel it's well worth picking up. This is the very best Darkstalkers game ever made, and it's one of the very best compilation titles of all time. The fact you can mix and match different gameplay styles, movesets, and characters between all three core games is absolutely awesome. Can't recommend this one enough, guys. That's Vampire Chronicle for matching service for the Sega Dreamcast. For the full written review, which includes a lot more information, hit up projectcoe.com.